All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are taking a deep dive into research methodology. You know, that thing that makes or breaks any credible study.
The foundation of good research, absolutely.
Exactly. We're going to be using understandingresearchmethodology.pdf that you sent over. And by the end of this deep dive, you'll not only understand research, but you'll be able to evaluate it with a critical eye.
It's like giving everyone X-ray vision for information.
Ooh, I love that. So before we get into the weeds a bit, let's talk big picture for a second. Why is this, research methodology so important? Can't we just, trust researchers to know what they're doing?
Well, sure, researchers are experts in their fields, but think of research methodology as like the blueprint for a building, right?
Yeah.
Make sure that the building isn't just standing, but that it's standing safely. It brings consistency, transparency, and that all-important, trustworthiness to the findings. Without a solid methodology, research can be, well, misleading or even biased.
Okay, so it's like a quality control system, but for knowledge.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I'm starting to see why this is a big deal. So let's say I'm, starting a research project. What's the first step? Where do I even begin?
Well, you always start with the foundation, right? And that means defining your research objectives.
Right.
So why are you doing this research? What gap in knowledge are you trying to fill?
Right.
The source that you provided, it outlines 5 common objectives: increasing knowledge, problem solving, exploring new phenomena, testing theories, or actually improving processes and products.
Right.
Yeah, so which of those speaks to you the most?
I'd say probably increasing knowledge and solving problems are the ones that jump out at me. But I can also see how all of them connect in different ways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And once you have those objectives in mind, then you can move on to choosing the right type of research for the task.
Okay. So the source talks about descriptive, exploratory, explanatory, and applied research. Can you give me an example of how those might play out in a real-world project?
Sure, yeah. Imagine you're working in marketing, and you're trying to understand your target audience for a new product, let's say. You might start with descriptive research. You analyze sales data, look at demographics, all that to get a picture of who's buying your product. And then you might go into exploratory research. So maybe you conduct some focus groups, to figure out why certain groups are drawn to the product.
Oh, I see. So it's like a detective, gathering clues, right?
Yes.
And then interviewing witnesses to get the full story.
Precisely. And then if you wanted to test a specific hypothesis, does a new ad campaign actually increase sales? That's when you'd use explanatory research. And then applied research actually takes the findings and, well, puts them to work. You use that knowledge to refine the campaign or boost sales or whatever the goal is.
Wow. It's fascinating how, they all sort of build on each other, these different types of research. So once I've got my objective, and I know the type of research, what's next?
Then comes the fun part, creating a research plan. This is the roadmap for your entire project. It's where you lay out, your approach, the specific methods you're going to use to collect data, analyze data, and also a timeline, a realistic one. It might seem a bit tedious, but trust me, having a well-thought-out plan will save you so many headaches later on.
Okay, so like any good project, research needs structure and a clear path forward. Makes sense. What about research design? The source mentioned that's a big decision. Why is that?
It is. Choosing the right research design is it's like choosing the right tool for the job. Like if you need to, hammer in a nail, you wouldn't use the screwdriver, right?
Right.
Different research questions just require different designs. For instance, if you're dealing with a complex social issue, something with, lots of nuances, you might want a qualitative design. So you would be using interviews or focus groups.
But if I wanted to test, a very specific cause and effect relationship, so let's say the impact of a new teaching method on student performance, I would need a different approach for it.
Exactly. In that case, you'd want to use an experimental design where you have a control group and an experimental group.
Right.
And this way, you can actually isolate the effects of that new teaching method. And sometimes you even need a mixed methods approach, combining elements of different designs to get a really comprehensive understanding.
So it's not one size fits all. You really need to think about the research question and pick the design that best fits what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is where things get really exciting, because once you have your plan and design, in place, it's time to go out and gather the evidence.
Okay, so let's talk about data collection. What are the different ways that researchers gather these valuable insights?
Well, there are 2 main ways.
Yeah.
Primary and secondary data collection. Primary data is, it's like fresh ingredients, right?
Yeah.
You're gathering brand new information directly from your target group. This might involve surveys, interviews, or even running experiments.
So if I was interested in, let's say, customer feedback on a new product, I could send out a survey,
Yeah.
have some one-on-one conversations with a few customers, or even set up like an experiment to compare the new product to an older version.
Yeah, got it. Each method has its own strengths and weaknesses, though. So surveys are great for gathering a lot of data quickly, but you don't always get a ton of depth.
Right.
Interviews can give you that depth, but they take more time. And experiments, well, they're great for figuring out cause and effect, but they can require a lot of resources.
Okay. What about secondary data? Is that kind of like using, pre-made ingredients instead?
Exactly. It's like tapping into existing information that's already out there. Think reports, academic journals, government databases, even historical records sometimes. This can save you a ton of time and resources, especially if someone has already done research on, a similar topic.
Right. So it's like our detective, but instead of, going out and interviewing people, they're using existing police records or newspaper articles to get up to speed. But when it comes to collecting data, whether it's primary or secondary, how do researchers actually decide who to include in their study? You can't, possibly study everyone, right?
You're absolutely right. That's where sampling techniques come in. Unless you're doing a census, which tries to collect data from an entire population, you have to carefully choose a smaller group to study that accurately represents that larger group you're interested in.
So it's all about choosing a group that reflects the whole group, but in miniature.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more about how that actually works.
So there are two main types of sampling: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Probability sampling is all about giving every member of the population an equal chance of being selected. And that minimizes bias, which makes the results more reliable. They're like, drawing names out of a hat. Everyone has an equal chance.
What about non-probability sampling? How is that different?
So non-probability sampling doesn't guarantee that equal chance for everyone. It's more common in exploratory research or when you're focusing on very specific groups. One example is convenience sampling. So researchers just select participants who are, readily available. Like if you're interviewing people on the street.
Right.
It's easy and inexpensive, but it can be pretty biased. Another type is purposive sampling, where you choose participants based on specific criteria.
Oh, so if I'm studying, let's say, the experiences of first-time marathon runners, I might specifically recruit people who have just finished their first marathon.
Exactly. It lets you gather really focused insights, but, those findings might not apply to all marathon runners out there. Choosing the right sampling technique depends on your research question, the resources you have, and all sorts of things.
Okay, so we've talked about planning the research, collecting the data, and then choosing who we're going to get the data from.
Right.
What happens next? So now we have all this data, but what do we do with it?
Now comes the fun part, making sense of it all. And that's where data analysis and interpretation come in.
Ooh, that sounds both really exciting and also kind of intimidating. Like, where do you even begin when you have mountains of data staring you in the face?
Well, the first step is think of it like tidying up a really messy room before you can start decorating. You got to process and prepare the data. So that means cleaning it, organizing it, handling any, missing values, outliers, all that fun stuff.
So it's like prepping all the ingredients before you can start cooking.
Exactly. Once your data's all prepped, you can start using statistical tools and techniques to find those hidden patterns, relationships, insights, all the good stuff that's buried in those numbers.
That's where things get a little bit technical, right? Like, what kind of tools are we talking about?
Yeah, there's a whole range of statistical software out there. SPSS and R are incredibly powerful. So, for example, if you wanted to understand the relationship between, let's say, advertising spend and sales, you could use regression analysis in SPSS. Or if you're comparing the effectiveness of, let's say, those different teaching methods, you might use something called ANOVA tests in R.
Okay, so those tools help you analyze the data and actually draw some conclusions from it. But it's not just about, crunching numbers, right? You have to be able to explain what it all means.
Absolutely. Data analysis without interpretation, it's like having a map but not knowing how to read it. Researchers have to translate those statistical findings into a clear story using tables, graphs, visualizations. All those things help communicate those findings in a way that, everyone can understand.
So it's really about telling the story of the data, making it accessible to others.
Exactly.
This has been really insightful. I feel like I've unlocked like a whole new level of understanding about how research works.
That's great to hear. And remember, this knowledge, it's not just for, researchers. It's for everyone.
Yeah, you're right. Whether you're reading a news article, trying to figure out if a product is worth it, or even just making decisions about your own life, understanding research methodology can help you be a smarter, more critical thinker.
It's like having a superpower,
Yeah,
the ability to see through all the hype and get to the heart of the matter.
I love that. Now, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, let's take a quick pause.
And when we come back, we'll explore some real-world ways to use these concepts and how you can use this newfound knowledge to be a more, discerning consumer of all the information out there.
Welcome back, everyone. Before the break, we really dug into those core concepts of research methodology. It's amazing how much goes into, designing a really solid study and, actually getting reliable results.
Yeah, it's definitely a systematic process. And as we start to explore some real-world applications, you'll start to see these concepts coming to life, across different fields.
Okay, so let's get practical. How can we actually use this knowledge to be, just smarter consumers of information? I mean, we're bombarded with studies and data every single day. How do we sift through it all and figure out what's actually credible?
Well, that's where that critical thinking cap comes in handy.
Right.
Remember, understanding research methodology, it gives you the power to ask the right questions. So let's say you see an article, right, and it claims that there's this new amazing weight loss supplement that's scientifically proven.
Right.
Don't just take their word for it.
Exactly. I would want to see, what kind of research did they do? Was it a randomized controlled trial, or was it just a small observational study, or?
Exactly. And how did they collect their data? Did they just rely on people, self-reporting their weight loss? Or did they use, more objective measures?
Oh, I see what you mean. So knowing about the different data collection methods, it helps me understand, how reliable that data actually is. And what about sample size? Was it a big group of people, and was it diverse? Or was it just a few people?
That's another super important question. Because a small sample size, it might not accurately represent the whole population.
Yeah.
Right? And that means the results are less generalizable. And remember those sampling techniques that we talked about? Was it a probability sample where everyone had a fair shot at being included? Or was it, maybe just a convenient sample that's, more likely to be skewed or biased?
This is eye-opening. I'm realizing there are so many layers to think about when you're trying to figure out if a study is actually credible or not. It's not just about the headline. It's about digging deeper into how the research was actually done.
Yeah, for sure. And that's just one example. Think about all the different kinds of research that influences our lives. Medical studies, educational research, economic reports, marketing surveys, it's everywhere. So understanding these basic principles, it really can make you a more informed consumer in, basically every aspect of your life.
Okay, so let's say I'm reading a news article, and it's about a study that links, social media use to anxiety in teenagers. What are some questions I should ask myself to figure out if it's, good research?
First, look at where it's coming from. Is it a reputable journal, or is it, some questionable website? Then dive into the methodology. Did they use a longitudinal study where they, followed people over time? Or was it just a snapshot in time?
And what about the type of research? Did they use surveys to measure anxiety, or did they do more in-depth interviews to get a more, nuanced understanding of how the teens were actually feeling?
Exactly. And always think about potential biases. Did the researchers account for, other things that could cause anxiety, things like family history or academic pressure? The more questions you ask, the better you'll be at figuring out, how believable the research is and whether the findings really mean anything.
It's like having a superpower, right? You can see right through the noise and get to what the research is really saying. It's empowering, to know that I can use this to evaluate everything from health claims to political polls.
Absolutely. And remember, research is always ongoing. What we think is, best practice today, it could change as new methods come out and new technologies emerge. So stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to question what you see.
I love that. So we talked about being critical consumers of research, but what about those who want to do their own research? Any takeaways for aspiring researchers out there?
Well, the first thing is start with a really clear research question. What knowledge gap are you trying to fill? What problem are you trying to solve? Once you have that solid base, then you can dive into the existing research, see what's already out there, and think about what's good and bad about those studies.
So, like, do your homework before you write the essay.
Exactly. And remember, research is a collaborative thing. Don't be afraid to reach out to mentors, colleagues, even potential participants. Getting feedback and guidance is super valuable.
Collaboration is key. What about those different types of research we talked about? How does someone choose the right approach?
Well, if you're just beginning to explore something brand new, exploratory research is probably a good starting point. If you have a hypothesis you want to test, an experimental design could be the way to go. And remember, it's always the research question that should be guiding your choice of methods.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job, just like we were talking about earlier with research design. But beyond the technical stuff, what about the human side of research?
Well, that's where ethical considerations come in. And these are, well, they're just absolutely crucial.
Right. You can't forget about the actual people who are a part of the research.
Exactly. Researchers have a responsibility to protect the well-being of everyone who participates. Making sure their privacy is protected and being upfront about the purpose of the study and any potential risks.
So it's about treating people with respect, being honest about the research, and making sure their involvement is totally voluntary and informed.
Yes, exactly. And that brings us to informed consent. Before anyone takes part in a study, they need to know what it's about, what they'll be doing, and any, potential benefits or risks. They should feel comfortable asking questions, and they should be able to decide if they want to participate or not.
It's about giving them control, right? Making sure they're not just, passive subjects. What about confidentiality? Why is that so important in research?
Well, confidentiality protects people's privacy. It means keeping their personal information and their responses, private. Researchers have to keep that data safe and only use it for the purposes they outlined when they got consent.
That makes sense. It builds trust, right?
Definitely. And it's important to remember that ethics isn't just some box you check off. It's woven into every part of the research process, from the design all the way to how you report your findings.
This has been such an insightful conversation. We've covered so much, from understanding different types of research and how to design studies to, real-world applications and, why ethics are so important. I feel like I have a totally new understanding of how powerful research is and how much it shapes our world.
Me too. And remember, this is just the beginning of your exploration. The more we learn about research methodology, the better we get at asking tough questions, evaluating evidence, and, contributing to a society that's really informed and values evidence.
It's about being an active participant in the world of knowledge, not just, passively consuming information.
Exactly. And as we move into our final segment,
yes,
we'll explore some thought-provoking questions and leave you with some really inspiring examples of how research has shaped the world we live in.
And we are back for the final part of our deep dive on research methodology. We've really covered a lot, haven't we? The what, the why, the how. From designing studies to, collecting that data and even talking about the importance of ethics.
Yeah, we even talked about how to be smart consumers of research and ask the right questions to see if a study is really credible.
Absolutely. And now I'm thinking, what are some examples of research that have really made a difference? The kind of research that has changed the game.
Oh, there are tons of examples. I mean, think about the medical breakthroughs that have completely changed healthcare. Things like vaccines for deadly diseases, life-saving antibiotics, organ transplantation, even, understanding genetics and personalized medicine. All of these things came from really rigorous research.
It's incredible when you think about it. Research has saved so many lives and, just improved the quality of life for countless people.
Yeah, and it's not just in medicine either. Research has changed the way we do agriculture, leading to bigger harvests and more sustainable farming. It's driven all kinds of technological advancements from the internet and smartphones to, renewable energy and space exploration.
It's like research is this engine of progress, right? Pushing the boundaries of what's possible in every field imaginable.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And let's not forget about the social sciences. Research has helped us understand human behavior so much better. Social dynamics and the factors that lead to things like crime, poverty, and inequality. And this knowledge is used to make policy decisions, create social interventions, and really try to build a more fair and just world.
So research isn't just about science and technology. It's about understanding ourselves and how we fit into the world. It's about using knowledge to solve those big problems and create real change.
Exactly. And that's why understanding research methodology is so important. It gives you the tools to not only appreciate the impact of research, but to actually engage with it, to think critically, to be part of a society that values evidence and uses it to make decisions.
It's about being an active participant in the world of knowledge, not just a passive consumer of information.
Right. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave you with a question to think about. Now that you know more about research methodology, how could you use this knowledge in your own life? What are you curious about? What problems do you want to solve?
Those are great questions to think about. And I really hope this deep dive has sparked that curiosity in all of you and made you want to learn even more. Remember, research is always changing, so keep being curious, keep asking questions, and never stop exploring.
And if you ever find yourself, feeling overwhelmed by all the information out there, just remember those critical thinking skills that we talked about.
Absolutely. Take a step back, ask the right questions, and use what you now know about research to navigate the world with confidence.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of research methodology. It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious and keep on diving deep into those fascinating topics that pique your interest.